Hello there, and thanks for joining me for this complete run through of the final screenplay of Holiday on the Buses. Now, once you've reached the final screenplay, usually the next step is for everyone to start packing their bags and head off to their locations to start filming. But with Holiday on the Buses, there was a problem. Just leading up to all this, Stephen Lewis injured his foot and he had to be set in plaster cast. So, what the writers Ronnie Wolfe and Ronnie Chesney had to do was dash back into this final screenplay and drastically edit it to work around Stephen's injury. Now, what's also interesting in this is that there are certain scenes in this final screenplay that were omitted, which have nothing to do with Stephen Lewis. So perhaps this gave the writers one last chance to completely go through the script and remove anything that they deemed not important. So as we go deep into this script, you'll start to see where these scenes were meant to be and what replaced them. Now, this film was originally called Still At It on the Buses. I'm glad they changed the name. It sounds a lot better. Perhaps it was changed once they got the option to use a holiday camp in Prestatyn, North Wales. But buckle up and here we go. So the story still starts at the depot. Only big difference is that there's no need for Blakey to injure his foot. But to set the scene up, it's described as there is a good quality car in the corner. Between the car and the bus depot, there is a small wooden hut, which is Blakey's office, the sort of temporary structure which has become a permanent fixture. It is from here that the inspector checks the buses in and out. Stan and Jack are standing by their bus. Blakey comes out of his hut and comes towards them, looking at his watch. Blakey says, "Come on, get that bus out and hurry up about it." Stan says, all right, all right. Now, we do get a name for the manager in this story. It's Mr. Hughes. He's standing by the car. He's helping his wife unload shopping from the boot. The bonnet is open on a strut and a mechanic is leaning in from the front examining the engine. So slightly different here because in the film the manager is looking at the engine. The manager looks across and sees the bus is about to depart. He says, "No, my wife's catching that bus." Blakey says, "Oh yes sir." He shouts across, "Don't go, don't go." Stan and Jack exchanged amused looks. The manager's wife is described as a plump, 40-ish middle-class lady wearing a blouse and skirt, a hat and carrying some flowers and 2 boxes of gateau, as would be purchased from a high-class cake shop. Now, I've no idea whether anybody was actually cast for this role, but just reading this description, I think Claire Davenport would have been absolutely perfect for this role. She was already a member of the On the Buses family as well, having appeared in the series. So Blakey takes some of the manager's wife shopping. He says, "Let me help." The manager says, "Our car's broken down, so my wife's catching the bus back home. I want you to see that she's dropped off at the top of Acacia Drive." Blakey says, "Yes sir, I'll go along in the bus with her. She'll be looked after." It then cuts to Stan and Jack by the side of the bus. They are eyeing up Joyce, a young, attractive, working-class housewife. She is wearing a skirt and a dark silk halter top, which is knotted behind her neck. She has a big bust and is quite obviously not wearing a bra. She is carrying loaded shopping bags in both hands. Now, this is, of course, the same lady who was in the film where her top falls off, played by Tara Lynn, who some may be intrigued to know that she was actually an adult film star. Stan says, "Core." He whistles at the girl. Joyce ignores him and goes to a post where there is a bus timetable. The inspector arrives at the platform with Mr. Hughes and his wife a little way behind. Blakey says, "Come on, stop leering and get moving." Stan gets into the cab. Blakey says to Jack, "Now I don't want any trouble. The manager's wife is going on this bus and I'm going with her." Jack says, "Okay, don't worry." Blakey takes the flowers and the gateau boxes. He then says, "Let me help you on, madam." Mrs. Hughes says, "I think I'll go upstairs." They start to go up the stairs. Jack gets on and rings the bell. Cuts to the bus moving off at haste. Joyce is heard calling, "Hey, hey." Stan turns his head right to look. From Stan's point of view, Joyce is running towards Stan's bus. After a few steps, the strain is too much for her halter top and it breaks round her neck, dropping down and revealing a subliminal flash of her bare bosom. Stan's reaction, he does an amazed take, a horn is heard hooting. He looks the other way, another bus is coming from Stan's left and bearing down on him. Stan has not taken his corner sharply enough, he jams the brakes on and pulls the handbrake. The wheels of Stan's bus are locked and skidding to a halt. The other bus, which has made a very sharp turn, just misses the left-hand side and knocks over the passenger shelter, then goes on to bash into the back of the manager's car where it stops. The bonnet of the car comes down, traps the mechanic, who has his head in there examining the engine. Now, of course, in the film, this traps the manager rather than this mechanic. On the platform of Stan's bus, the inspector and the manager's wife have fallen down the stairs and are in a heap on the platform, amidst a mess of crushed flowers and squash gatto. They have so fallen that the inspector's hand has gone into the wife's blouse. He's struggling indignantly. Mrs. Hughes yells, "Take your hand away, take that away." The inspector withdraws his hand. "It was an accident." "Your hand didn't get there by accident. Look at all my shopping." Blakey says, "I'll get the bus back in the depot." The inspector gets off the platform, yells at Jack and Stan, "Reverse back in. I'll get you for this, butler." Stan is reversing back into the depot very quickly. Suddenly, the inspector yells out as he sees the bus might hit the manager's car. "Watch out for the car." It shows the side of Stan's bus is scraping the side of the manager's car. Now, from the inspector's hut, the manager comes out and sees the damage being done to his car. He screams, "My car!" Jack shouting, "Stan, turn your wheels." From the manager's point of view, the back of the bus turns and comes bearing down on him. He retreats into the hut. Stan's bus backs into the hut and demolishes it. The inspector and Jack look on in horror. Blakey yells, "Pull forward, pull forward. Oh my God." Stan, in his cab, looking back at the hut, engages forward gear and the bus leaps forward. Stan slams right into the side of another bus, which topples it completely over onto its side, squashing the other passenger shelter as it falls. The manager arises from the wreck of the inspector's hut, covered in dust and debris, and makes towards Stan. This then marks the end of the opening scene, and we are then at the unemployment office, which nothing is changed bar the fact that Blakey doesn't tell Stan that he's broken his big toe. So the following scene, just like in the movie, is inside the butler's house. It does differ quite a bit here. Now, on the script, Arthur hasn't come in from work yet. It's just Stan sitting on the sofa with his shoes off and he's got a beer. Mum's knitting. Little Arthur, described as a podgy, tough-looking 5-year-old, is playing with his toys, among which there is a shiny toy revolver. The front door is heard slamming. Mum says, "Oh, there's the front door. That must be Arthur." Arthur comes straight in, still wearing his overcoat. Now, in the film, if you look closely, Arthur is actually just taking off his overcoat and hanging it up. So there could have been something previously filmed and taken out right there. Mum says to him, "Evening, dear." Arthur replies, "Evening." He goes for Stan. "How did you get on at the Labour Exchange this time?" Stan, without taking his eyes off the paper, says, "Still nothing doing." And then Arthur goes on to use a familiar line that's in the film, "It's been 6 weeks since you haven't worked." Stan takes the bottle of beer and goes to top up the glass. And he says, "It's not my fault. There's no jobs." Olive says, "Oh, Arthur, I was waiting for you to come in. Look, what do you think? I bought a new beach wrap for our holiday." Arthur replies, "It's full of holes." And Olive says, "Yes, the lady in the shop said it was very sexy." Arthur replies, "It is. You can see your knickers." Olive opens the wrap to show him. "They're not. That's my new bathing suit." "You can still see your knickers." "Her knickers are underneath," Mum says. Olive says, "'Cause I've just put it on to try. Is the costume all right, Mum?" Olive turns and lifts up her wrap to show off the bottom half of her costume. The shorts were all wrinkled horizontally, as if they were too big. Stan says, "The shorts are a bit floppy over your bottom." And Arthur says, "The shorts are all right. She just happens to have a floppy bottom." Mum says, "Oh, Arthur." To Olive, "You'll have to water them before you go away, love." And Arthur says, "She doesn't have to. She can take them back to the shop. We are not going." And Olive says, "Not going?" Arthur replies, "As your brother seems incapable of finding a job, I cannot afford to take you to Spain. I've cancelled the tickets today. Otherwise, I would have lost my deposit." Mum says, Oh, Arthur, Olive was so looking forward to it. Your first holiday abroad. It would have been the second honeymoon. Stan says, second honeymoon? Blimey, he hasn't got over the first. He came back a physical wreck. Olive, who is now tearful, says he arrived there a physical wreck. Arthur says, will you shut up? It was not my fault I had to have an operation. Olive says, it ruined the first 3 months of my marriage. Arthur says, that was because the hospital kept me waiting. Olive, bitterly, says, you weren't the only one who was kept waiting. And Olive goes. So this is quite interesting because we know how tight-fisted Arthur is, and basically I think he's assuming that something Stan earns is going to assist in paying for his holiday, because there's no reason for him to cancel it if he's not going to ponce off someone else to pay it. Mum says, well, I think it's terrible you can't go away. Me and Stan were looking forward to looking after little Arthur, weren't we, Stan? Stan says, yeah. Here, where is he? He said he had a surprise for me. Stan looks to one side, and just like in the film, from behind the sofa, a little hand comes up holding a large shiny toy revolver. Jack then comes in telling Stan about the holiday, and Stan says, cool, I fancy that job. Look, Mum, read about it. So Mum's studying it, and it's at that moment that the chaos erupts. Little Arthur has climbed on a chair and fires his pistol. Arthur jumps a mile. Arthur says, "Caw, you little... I'll murder him." Arthur chases little Arthur, who pushes the table with a bowl of flowers and beer on it, sends it crashing onto Stan. Mum shrieks out, "Watch out. No, Arthur, don't touch him." Little Arthur starts to yell. Olive, in her dressing gown, comes in. She's about to say, "What's going on? Leave him alone, you great big bully." Arthur says to her, "He spilt water all over your slippers." Olive then has a change of mind and says, "What? I'll kill him." Little Arthur is hidden under a table. Olive and Arthur try to get at him. Mum is restraining them. They are all shrieking. It is bedlam. And then comes the conversation that Jack says to Stan, "Your mum's right, how can you leave your family?" And Stan says, "I'll force myself." We are now at the holiday camp, which we know turned out to be Prestatyn Pontins in North Wales. Slightly different dialogue here. Stan and Jack are still walking across the forecourt, and he says, "What a smashing place. To think they're paying us to work here." A little train goes by with kiddies on it. Jack says, "Yes, 25 quid a week and all found." All found, if you don't know, means board and lodging free. Two pretty girls go by on a twin bicycle. Two others are talking together. They stare at Stan and Jack and smile. And Stan says, "I think I've already found it." In the film, we don't see the girls go by on a twin bicycle, but we do see Stan walk between the two ladies. We finally get to hear how long they're actually there for. Jack says to Stan, 4 months here? Cool, we've fallen on our feet." And Stan says, "After 4 months here, we'll be on our hands and knees." So Stan and Jack are approaching the main gates in the bus. In this, only one gate is closed. He still bibs his horn, and Blakey comes out and looks at him with disbelief. There's not much more conversation there, because in the film they're talking about the pen and sign this and about Blakey's foot, but all Blakey does is open the gate here, and Stan drives through. The inspector shouts after him, "Butler, you're worse than ever." Stan stops the bus just past the gate. He shouts, "Don't worry, I'll get to the station on time." And Blakey yells, "No, you won't, you're going the wrong way." And he points that way. Now, for anyone who's been to the holiday camp, that's actually quite possible that the location guy went and did the recce for this and saw that the road could go left and right from the as you come out of the holiday camp. Stan says, "Oh," he reverses the bus and nearly hits the gates, which the inspector has to reopen in a hurry. He stands behind the bars of the gate. He calls Butler a moron, shakes his fist through the bars. Some holidaymakers going into the camp look surprised. Stan says to them, "Don't feed him, he's dangerous." And Jack addresses one of the women and says, "And don't get too near, it's the mating season." And they drive off. Some time has passed and the bus has come back to the camp, and it's parked up near the main building, and the happy holidaymakers are getting off. He starts to have his conversation with Mavis. Suddenly, Mrs. Hudson, a tough, gargantuan battle axe of a woman, comes up. Says, "Mavis, come along." Mavis says, "Yes, Mum," and gives Stan a dirty wink. "See you," she said. It's at this point for the first time that we actually see something that is in the film that isn't in the script, and that is of Blakey addressing his security guys, where Stan and Jack are with him, and once he's spoken to his staff, they are heading towards the nurse's hut. Now, it's pretty much along the same lines, but of course he hasn't got a bad foot here, so there's some slightly different dialogue to the reason Blakey has been seeing the nurse for treatment. After she's opened the door and says, "How are you, dear?" and Blakey says, "Oh, very well, thank you," she says to him, "Did that ointment I rubbed in do the trick?" And Blakey, with a sideways glance at the two chaps, says, "Yes." And she says, "I think I ought to rub a bit more in tonight." After the nurse has gone, Jack says, "No hanky-panky with the staff." And Stan says, "You dirty old man, show us where she rubbed the ointment." And Jack replies, "No, he can't. Not here. He'd be done for indecent exposure." Blakey says, "I happen to have a scratch right in the middle of my back." Blakey points to the small of his back. "Right there." And Jack says, "Hey, Blakey, have you, with her yet?" And he says, "How dare you? I've only known her for 4 weeks. She's a very respectable young woman. All she wants is companionship." Stan says, "Going with him, that's all she'll ever get." Now, the difference here is that it's Stan who says to Blakey in the film, "Have you had it off with her?" rather than Jack. The next scene is inside the holiday village, and it's leading up to the moment just before Stan phones home to speak with Arthur. They walk along, and Jack says to him, "Coming to eat?" And Stan says, "In a minute, just going to phone home." So he does phone home, and he's having his chat with Arthur. And Stan says to him, "I'm telling you, all the entertainment's for free. It's marvellous. And it's self-catering, so Olive can do the cooking." Arthur says, "Eh?" And Stan says, "Well, there's a self-service cafeteria as well." And Arthur replies, "That sounds more like it. How do we get there?" We then get there's a good train service. I reckon it will cost you about 14 quid in fares. Arthur says, 14 quid? There must be a cheaper way, rather than, "Oh no, it won't," which is what we see in the film. So we're now outside the butler's house. The departure is slightly extended here. Olive, wearing a crash helmet, comes out through the gate, and we see for the first time that she is carrying 3 suitcases bulging with articles, a net bag full of various items, 2 coats, etc., etc. She is followed by little Arthur, who is carrying a beach bucket and spade, a rubber ball, a little boat, and a rubber duck, a teddy bear and his water pistol, and a toy revolver. Arthur says, "Are you mad? We can't take all that." Olive says, "I did what you said and only took the essentials." Mum comes out the house ready to go. She is also wearing the crash helmet. Mum says to Arthur, "Oh, Arthur, don't do up the ropes." Arthur is just tying the last knot. Mum appears on the pavement. She's carrying another battered suitcase bursting at the seams. "We nearly left this case behind." Arthur reacts violently. Mum puts the case down on the pavement. "And I can't find the little blue case." Arthur says, "I tied that on first. It's there." He points to the bottom of the pile. And Mum says, "Well, you'll have to open it, dear." Arthur replies, "What?" And Mum says, "Yes, the back door key's in it." "Oh, cool, blimey," Arthur says, "and I told Stan we'd be leaving early." Now, I can imagine this being filmed and Arthur being in a much more sore mood other than just gore blimey. We are then briefly back at the holiday camp, and Jack's yelling out, "Get your tickets for the circular tour." And they had the conversation about what time did the family leave. Back outside the butler's house, the engine is running. Arthur, terribly exasperated, says, "Right, can we go?" Olive is in the road and gets on. Olive says, "All right, Arthur, I'm on." Arthur says, "Right, that's it, and I'm not coming back for anything." Now, in the film, they do leave little Arthur behind, but there's a bit more to it here than actually just him shouting, "Come back." He gets on the bike, pulls down his goggles, as does Olive, revs up, and the bike moves off, revealing little Arthur standing on the pavement. Little Arthur yells, "Hey, what about me?" A little further down the road, the motorcycle combination is going off. Olive is heard shouting. She says, "You've forgotten the kid." The combination does a complete turn in the road and comes back. So when the butlers are heading to their chalet with the luggage, we do still have Wally and Lil sitting on the grass in their deck chairs. Once Wally has spotted them, he actually says, "What a shower." And Lil says, "Yes, not like us, bleeding common." Now, I think this is the more funnier line, but of course it's a lot more risque. We know what Wally's trying to say. kind of the pot calling the kettle black here, but I think the writers just dulled it down a little bit, and this then became what a load of rubbish. We then come to the evening time in the chalet when Stan and Arthur are on their knees scrubbing the floor of dirt. Mum's actually in this part. She isn't in the movie. She comes out of the bedroom wearing a pair of Stan's pyjamas. She has the trousers on back to front and speaks to Stan and Arthur. She says, "Sounds as if they're having a marvellous time in the bar. How are you getting on?" Stan says, "OK, Mum, we've nearly got it all out." He looks up and says, "Oh, you managed to get into my pyjamas?" Mum says, "Yes, a bit tight." She lifts the bottom of the jacket up to show. Stan says, "You've got the trousers on back to front." And Mum jokingly says, "Well, they seemed warmer that way. I've given your other pair to Olive." And that's when Olive comes out and has the conversation that she does with them in the film. After Arthur has said to Olive, "I think I'll give the carpet another scrub," Olive says, "Well, if you do that, I shall probably be asleep when you come in." And Arthur says, "Yes." He seizes the brush and starts scrubbing. Olive goes out sulking, and there's slightly extended scene here between Arthur and Stan. Arthur, looking fed up, says, "What a holiday. Nearly all our belongings gone. We'll have to leave tomorrow." Stan says, "What are you talking about? You've paid up for 10 days at the chalet. You'll just have to manage." Arthur says, "Manage? How?" And Stan replies, "Well, you've got money for your grub and you can borrow stuff from me and Jack, and Mum and Olive can buy a few things." We then come to the scene where the bus is ready to depart for the mystery tour. Mavis comes up to Stan and they have their chat. She tells him that Mum won't let her go, but she's going to bingo from 6 till 7 and she'll be alone in her chalet. And the number she gives him here is 11B. And in the movie, it becomes 344. Who knows why? Stan then gets on the bus. He starts to drive off and he's left Jack behind. Jack has to sprint for the bus. He shouts, "What's up? Wait for me." We then move on to the waterfall shot when Stan's actually ready to depart and nobody else is. He looks at his watch and says, 20 to 6. I'll never get back in time for my date. Hurry them up. They're taking too long over tea. And Jack says, "Don't blame me," pointing to the cafe door. "I didn't know he was coming along." Blakey, like in the film, comes out with 2 ice creams and says, "Here you are, my dear." Joan turns to Jack and says, "Oh, isn't he nice? He's got a big one for me." Jack turns to Stan and says, "Well, she's right as regards the ice cream." Stan tells Blakey to hurry up and they have the exact same conversation as they do in the film, but here Stan adds, "You're on a staff pass, don't come it with me." Joan says her, "Come along Cyril, we'll go up on top, you'll get a better view from up there." And Jack says the view's not bad from down here. And Blakey says, "How dare you? I wasn't looking, lecherous moron." Jack says, "Come off it, you've gone all hot and bothered." Blakey replies, "How can you tell?" And Stan says, "Your moustache is quivering." And Blakey says, "Oh, shut up." Stan says, "Are they all on?" And Jack says, "All except one, your sister." "Olive," Stan says. He then yells out, "Come on, Olive, or we'll leave without you." He then says to Jack after consulting his watch, "I'll never make it by 6. I'll only have a little time with Mavis." Olive comes out of the cafe clutching her ice cream and some cakes and buns. So slightly different, as in the film she comes out clutching the candy floss. So some very interesting scenes on the way home from the mystery tour when they are tearing along at pace. 2 ladies have their umbrellas up, and once they go through all the branches and greenery, they are then bent back and torn off, and you see the 2 women just holding the umbrella stems. Now, it is described as one old man has a toffee apple stuck right in his mouth after all the chaos. He pulls it away and his false teeth are stuck firmly in the apple, leaving him with a gummy smile. Cynthia Price, who was up on top of the bus, she was an extra throughout the film. She's seen many, many times. She informs me that this was actually Wilfrid Bramble. This was Bert. Now, in the film, Bert does not come on the mystery tour, but in the script, here he is. And I think that would have been amazing. I mean, we've seen what Steptoe does when he pulls his teeth out. and to have seen them in an apple would have been absolutely hilarious. And you can just picture that. Now, it was filmed, so, you know, must have been removed for timing, because you wouldn't remove such a funny scene like that. It's a shame, but there you go. So Butler is continuing to drive along the road. It's described as: Stan is smiling with his eyes glued to the road. As he races the bus along, the bell starts ringing like mad. He looks back in surprise and pulls on the brake. It cuts to the shot of the bus slowing down and stopping. Blakey, with ice cream, leaves and branches, gets off the bus, followed by Arthur, Olive, Joan and other passengers, all messed up. They rush to the front. Blakey shouts, "I'll get you for this, Butler." It shows to a shot of Stan in the driving seat. He realises what's happened, turns off the engine with a look of resignation. Now, again, this was filmed. Cynthia informs me about this, that she remembers the bus stopping and some of the main cast getting off. The bus has arrived back at the holiday camp. Stan comes running along. Mavis is at the door of her chalet. She is on a ground level chalet in this, wearing a skimpy sunsuit. She waves as she sees him. Just as he gets up to the chalet, Mr. Coombs comes along the other way. He's in a grim mood. Mr. Coombs says, "Ah, Butler, just the man I wanted to see. I've had a lot of complaints about your driving on the mystery tour." Stan says, "Oh, yes, well, I didn't know the way." Mr. Coombs says, "Well, that's not good enough. I want a full explanation. You better come with me to my office." Stan says, "Can I come later, sir?" And Mr. Coombs says, "No, now. What's the matter with you? You're all on edge. Now come along." I think this was good, and this would have been great if it had been left in, because, you know, this is Butler out of his comfort zone now. He's not at the depot and he can't get away with everything. And, you know, Coomsy's giving him a dressing down here. He needs to know his place, but, you know, he hasn't been let off. Coombs leads the way past Mavis at the door of her chalet. Stan gives a helpless shrug as he goes off. A while later, Stan comes running along, all out of breath. He rings at the doorbell. He turns as he waits and reacts in horror. From his point of view, he sees Mrs. Hudson has just turned the corner and is coming up to the door. Mavis opens the door. She's very annoyed. She says, "Oh, and where the..." And she stops as her mother comes up. "Mum," says to Stan, "and what, may I ask, are you doing here?" And Stan says, "Well, I was just going to ask Mavis, your daughter, if she'd like to come for a drink." And Mrs. Hudson says, "Oh, well, yes, all right, good idea. We can all go together." Stan's face drops. Mrs. Hudson turns and goes in front. Mavis shrugs her shoulders and Stan and Mavis follow her. Next, we come to Jack and Stan arriving outside the ballroom in the holiday camp. Now, this is quite a bit different. It's not as in-depth with Blakey teaching everybody. And also, Bert is not in this scene yet. We haven't been introduced to him, so he doesn't come up and ask Mum if she's married, etc., etc. So, Stan and Jack have come along, continuing the conversation clearly. Jack says, "I don't believe it." And Stan says, "Honest, Blakey's in charge. You know how he was always mad on old time dancing at the bus depot. Mum's joined the class." And Jack says, "This we must see." And they slip into the ballroom. So the nurse is still in there looking bored, and Blakey is talking to some of his dancers. And he says, "I'm afraid none of you have the right stance. Now please watch. This is the basic military two-step." The inspector puts his hand on his hip. The piano starts playing and he starts dancing on his own. And carries on, and a 1 and 2 and 3, and you turn. The inspector does the steps in time with his instructions, and it's here. Stan says, "Blimey, I think he's turned a long time ago." Next, we come to a scene that would have followed the boat cruise. It is of Olive, Arthur and little Arthur in the toddler's playground. Described as: Olive and Arthur are with little Arthur by the side of the toddler's plastic slide, trying to make him go on it. Olive says, "Go on, darling, go on the slide." And little Arthur says, "No, you go." Olive replies, "Oh yes, all right, Mummy will go first." Olive starts up the steps. There is a notice on the slide, "For small children only." Arthur says, "It's only for kids." Olive says, "It won't matter." Olive is at the top of the slide. It then shows little Arthur pulling away a trestle under the centre of the slide. As Olive gets to the middle, the slide starts to sag in the middle. She shrieks, "It's giving way." Arthur says, "What do you expect? It's not made to take more than 12 stone." The slide buckles completely and Olive is caught between both bits. Arthur says, "You stupid great lump. Quick, get out of there. We can't afford to pay for any damage." Little Arthur shouting, "Mummy's broken the slide." Arthur says to him, "Will you shut up?" He yanks little Arthur out of the playground and Olive comes rushing after them. Now, this is interesting because I've spoken to Adam Rhodes about this and he recalls going for a walkthrough of this scene. So they did rehearse it. It was never filmed. Obviously, there was a lot to do with this. You couldn't do more than one take, I would have thought, because, of course, if a slide's going to bow in the middle and you're loosening things, then, you know, that's really time consuming. It's also dangerous as well. It looks good on paper, but, you know, you've got a grown woman in Anne and Karen on a slide, and if, you know, anything could happen. So that was obviously, they decided against that, as funny as it would have been. There was a playground in the background, of course, as Blakey's chasing Stan across to the water, so I can assume it could only have been on one of the slides there. So, next, on the holiday camp by one of the paths, Olive, Arthur and little Arthur come rushing round the corner and stop dead at what they see. Olive shouts, "Look at Mum!" Mum and Bert, a middle-aged man, sprite, quite smartly dressed, and like Mum, young at heart, are riding together on a twin bicycle. They come to a halt near the bar entrance. Mum waves to Olive. They get off the bicycle and go towards the bar entrance, arm in arm. Now, some of you may be aware that out there on the World Wide Web is a photo of Doris Hare and Wilfred Bramble on one of these bicycles. Now, it's classed as a promotional shot, but I believe that this was rehearsed. I don't know whether it was filmed or not, but it was certainly rehearsed. So at the bar entrance, Stan and Jack are standing talking as Mum and Bert pass them. Mum winks at Stan. They go into the bar. Stan says, "Blimey, the old girl's doing all right." Jack replies, "Must be the sea air." Stan says, "Not half," as he waves to a girl. "Hi, Sandra." From his point of view, a sexy looking blue coat girl in her late 20s is supervising kids. She waves back to Stan. Jack says, "You're doing all right." Stan says, "Yes, just between ourselves, I think I've clicked with Sandra and she's got no mum to get in the way." And Jack then goes on to say, "Trouble is, she's staff, so she's got no chalet either. Where can you take her?" So kind of the same words that are used in the film. And Stan says, "Don't worry, mate. I've got it all worked out this time." There's a slight extension to the scene where Stan is trying to usher all of the family out of the chalet in time for Sandra coming round. Mum's got a new wig on, and she said there's other pleasures in life other than eating. Just because there's snow on the roof, it doesn't mean the fire's gone out. Stan then says urgently, "Yes, well, hurry up, it's getting late." He says, "Oh, I haven't put my mascara on," and she dashes to the mirror to dab it. Mum says, "Oh, I can't see to do it without my glasses." Stan says, "You can't put it on when you're wearing glasses." Olive says, "I do." And Arthur replies, "That's why you generally end up by putting it on your nose." And Stan says, "Come on, Mum, he's waiting. Don't bother with that." He almost pushes them out. He says, "Have a nice time," and he ushers them out. Stan is standing at the door and watches Mum, Olive, Arthur and Bert go off. They turn back and wave. Stan says, "Enjoy yourselves." As the family turn the corner and go out of sight, Mum shouts back, "Thank you, you're a good boy staying in by yourself." The family disappear round the corner. Stan waits for a few seconds, he looks the other way and whistles. Sandra peeps round the corner and then comes towards Stan. Now, I've spoken to Sandra Bryant about this and she has no recollection of even rehearsing this, so this would have just been scrapped straight from the script. Inside the entertainment bar, the bar is packed with holidaymakers having a good time. A group is playing and people are dancing. Now, if you look closely in the film, Arthur, while they are dancing, is looking at a lady in a white jumper. Now, I think she had a slightly extended scene here. It's described as Olive and Arthur are dancing. Arthur keeps craning to look at a well-stacked, sexy girl sitting at the edge of the dance floor. Olive yanks him back, nearly breaking his neck. Cut to a table in the bar. Mum and Bert are having a drink and are getting very cosy. He puts his arm around her shoulder. She doesn't object. Some slight change in dialogue after Stan has taken little Arthur to bed. Little Arthur says, I want my pistol, rather than saying, can I have? Stan desperately says, yes, yes, all right, where is it? And little Arthur says, Daddy put it on top of the wardrobe. Stan reaches for it and gives it to him. And he says, now will you go to sleep? And little Arthur says, yes, uncle. Some additional dialogue between Mum and Bert. They're in the dance hall having their drinks. Mum says, it's a bit noisy. Arthur and Olive will be here for hours. Let's go back to my chalet for a quiet drink. And Bert says, yes, why not? And Mum says, my Stan's there, but he'll be glad to get away. He must be bored to tears. And off they go. So Mum has come back to the camp and walked in on Stan and Sandra. After they've had their early dialogue, Stan says, this is Sandra, Mum. And Sandra says, how do you do? Mum coldly says, you might have told me. I didn't know you'd have a girl here. Stan goes on to say, well, I'm old enough, indicating to Bert. Come to that, why'd you bring him back so early? And Mum goes on to say, well, if you're old enough, so am I. You're supposed to be looking after the boy, rather than little Arthur. I'd better see he's all right. Mum says, you naughty, naughty boy. How did he manage to get hold of this pistol? Stan says, well, and then little Arthur says, Uncle Stan gave it to me. Stan is trying hard to contain himself. Mum says, Stan, how could you? Oh, in sudden horror. Look, he's sprayed nail varnish. Stan says, what? Quick, where's the nail polish remover? Stan grabs a big bottle marked nail polish remover and a wad of cotton wool. Must get it off before it dries too hard, he says. Stan has put some remover on the pad. He starts to rub the pale green door, which is crisscrossed with crimson lines of colour from the pistol. As he does so, the paint on the door also dissolves, and the whole patch becomes a psychedelic mess. Stan says, oh no. Mum replies, what? And Stan says, it's melting the paint on the door. What are we going to do? He's panic-stricken. They'll make us pay for the damage. They don't mind normal wear and tear, but they won't stand for this. Mum says, but we haven't got any money, Stan. And he says, I'll get the sack, I will. Mum replies, oh, Stan. And then Stan goes on to say, there's only one thing for it. We'll have to scrounge some paint and do it ourselves. A good extended scene at the maintenance store here where they are pinching the paint. Jack comes out of the stores holding 2-gallon tins of paint and some paintbrushes. He puts them in the pram, pulls a cushion over them, and Stan immediately puts little Arthur in the pram on the cushions. There's no, I want to walk, etc. They set off, walking very fast, almost running. They turn the corner and come face to face with Blakey. Blakey says, oh, it's you. What's the hurry? And they stop. Stan says, no hurry, just taking my little nephew for an outing. He likes going fast. Blakey says, bit big for a pram, isn't he? Doesn't look too comfortable. And little Arthur says, that's because I'm sitting on, and Stan interrupts him, some cushions. Stan and Jack hurry off, pushing the pram. They look back. As soon as the inspector has turned out of sight, they start belting along with the pram. Stan and Jack arrive with the pram. As they arrive, the door to the chalet opens as if by magic, and they walk straight in with the pram. The door closes behind them. Some extra dialogue in the chalet when Stan has come in to check that the painting's gone well, and Mum says she wants to talk about money, and Stan says, OK, Mum, let me go to the loo first. In here, he's a little bit more gentlemanly about it. He says, OK, Mum, must just pop into the loo, then you can tell me. Stan goes into the bathroom. Mum says, I worked out the budget, we'll only have enough money left for food. And Olive says, well, we do get all the entertainment for free. And Mum says, I know, love, but we mustn't have any more accidents. Couldn't stand any extra expense. There are a few extra words between Stan and Jack when they're looking on from a distance at Blakey and the nurse. Stan says, blimey, look, Blakey having sex. And Jack says, him? She's just stringing him along. She wants a husband. In the meantime, she's having her last fling with me. Stan says, you're not. And Jack says, let's face it, she won't get many flings when she's married to him. Just a small tidbit, in the chalet after the drains have blown up, Stan says, what am I going to tell them? And Mum says, could say I put down too much Harpic. Now in the film, she says, could say I put down too much Carbolic. So this could have well been a sponsorship lined up from Harpic for a few pounds, but didn't happen in the end. So we then come to the evening time and the big dance in the ballroom. Now, of course, there's no sign of Bert here again, so it's Mum who's dancing with Blakey. So obviously in the film, Blakey's sitting down and he's able to monitor everything. But here, he's not fully focused on certain things because he's dancing with Mum. So there's a close-up shot of the inspector and Mum dancing, and then a close-up of Arthur and Olive. Arthur has a fixed grin smile on his face. He speaks out of the corner of his mouth. Left foot on the turn. Olive says, "Eh?" Olive puts the wrong foot forward and kicks Arthur in the shin. Arthur's reaction, he nearly cries out. Then, with a fixed smile back on his face, snarls at Olive. "You clumsy cow." The dance continues. The team are performing the military two-step. All the audience and holidaymakers are enjoying it all. We see that 3 of the couples are not holding hands at this stage, but Olive is still hanging on to Arthur's hand. Arthur, shouting at her through his fixed smile, "Let go of my hand." Olive says, "I can't, my bracelet's caught in your cufflink." Arthur says, "Well, get it uncaught." They dance a few more bars with Olive trying to shake free of Arthur. Then the dancers arrive at the point where the man salutes and the lady curtsies. As Arthur salutes, Olive curtsies and pulls Arthur's hand smartly downwards, throwing him right off balance. Arthur says, "Watch what you're doing." Arthur pulls his arm back smartly, jerks Olive, and we see her spectacles fall off. She steps forward, taken off balance. Olive says, "My glasses, I trod on them." Olive holds Arthur back as she picks up her spectacles. The lenses are intact, but the hinges are falsed, so that as she holds them by one side piece, they hang down in one straight line. It's also noted here, while this is happening, the 6 other dancers must be dancing rather statically some way ahead. Arthur says, "Keep dancing." Olive, not knowing what to do with her spectacles, drops them down her dress, and then Olive and Arthur half run, half dance up to their place behind the third couple. As they get there, the couples are now in a straight line from front to back. They then move forward for a few steps. Then the men turn to one side and their lady partners turn to the other. Arthur and Olive go to follow suit, but as they try to move away from one another, they are held together at the wrist and they can't separate. They pull and they pull, but the fixing won't budge. Now, this is where Blakey spots that something's going on. He turns round as he dances, he reacts and hisses out, "Separate." Arthur and Olive, they pull their arms apart in one last violent gesture. There is the sound of ripping, and the whole of Arthur's shirt sleeve comes away and remains fixed to Olive's bracelet. The audience are laughing their heads off. It then cuts to Stan and Jack bringing the toilet back to the chalet, and then when they return to the ballroom, the old-time dancing team are bowing at the end of their dance as the band play a chord. The audience are clapping with lots of good-humoured laughing. The team rush off the dance floor in total disarray. Next comes a scene that did not make it into the film. In the corner of the ballroom, Blakey, Mum, Arthur and Olive arrive there. Blakey, almost in tears, says, "You made an absolute fool out of me. What happened?" Olive shows Arthur's shirt sleeve still attached to her bracelet. Olive says, "His sleeve got caught in my Lucky Charm bracelet." Blakey says, "Well, it didn't bring you much luck tonight." Olive says, "No, I broke my glasses." Now, there's a slightly different scene for when Olive wants to go to the main block to use the loo. Blakey isn't in the toilets. It's described as Olive comes along to where the toilets are. There are 2 doors adjacent, one with a little woman painted on it and the other with a little man. They are not dissimilar. Olive squints at the man picture, obviously not quite sure. Then a very long-haired youth wearing a kilt comes along and goes into the men's. Olive looks relieved, thinks he's a girl, and follows him in. We hear a scream, she comes running out and dashes into the ladies. So there's no Blakey coming out saying disturbing my ablutions. The next day in the staff canteen, Stan and Jack are sitting at a table having a cup of tea. Stan has been telling him all about Olive's escapade. They both laugh. Stan says, "Poor old Olive, her love life never goes right." Blakey and Joan go by with cups of tea. She winks at Jack. Jack says, "Mine does. The more treatment she gives me, the weaker I feel." Stan says, "Blakey will get you." Jack says, "No." It is here where the flirting starts with Maria and Stan. So Luigi has spotted this and called Maria into the kitchen. So it's all described in English here, the conversation between Luigi and Maria. He'll yell at her, "Maria, you come here." So the argument begins. He points through the hatch at Stan. Luigi says, "Remember my promise to Mama and Papa. If you go out with that bum, I will cut his throat. He waves his knife and sends you home. Maria says, mind your own business, you pig. I might be your younger sister, but I'm old enough to do as I please. Maria turns to go and he grabs her. I am warning you, Luigi says, I will kill him. Maria tears herself away and says, ha, peasant. Stan is sitting eating with Jack and Maria comes back to the table. Maria says to him, Stanley, my love, tonight the manager, Mr. Coombs, is going to the films and I will be cleaning his house. You come at 8 o'clock? Stan's taken aback, says, well, yes, will it be all right? And she says, we will be alone for 3 hours. Cool, Stan says, starts eating like mad. 3 hours, I better have another portion of kidneys. We are then at the manager's bungalow and Mr. Coombs and Mrs. Coombs are about to leave for the cinema. Coombs says, all right, Maria, we won't be back till midnight, so keep the door double locked. Mrs. Coombs says, I didn't feel up to it, dear. I left you to clear the kitchen table. And Maria says, good night, sir. Good night, madam. Mr. Coombs says, and don't open the door to any strangers. Maria shuts the door. Mr. and Mrs. Coombs get into their car and drive off. As soon as the car has disappeared, Maria opens the door and looks out. Stan is looking around the corner of the bungalow. He emerges and comes towards the front door. She lets Stan in. Stan says, hello, love. Maria closes the door, locks it and pulls across a large bolt. Stan gives her a kiss. Stan produces a small box of chocolates from behind his back. He says, here, I bought you these. Maria says, oh, grazie, and she kisses him back. Stan says, well, come on, let's make ourselves comfortable on the sofa. Maria says, no, first the kitchen table. Obviously, she needs to clean it, but Stan thinks, well, anywhere you like, I'm not particular. After it has next cut to dialogue in the bar with Mum and Bert and Arthur and Olive, we come back to the manager's bungalow. Stan and Maria are in a passionate brace on the sofa. Maria, sex-starved, is making all the going. She's kissing him madly, running her hands through his hair and scratching him. They roll about. As she starts to pull his shirt open, she speaks in hoarse Italian. Oh, my lover, take me, do what you will with me, kiss me. Stan, coming up for air, says, I don't know what you're saying, but I get the idea. This would have been a funny scene if it had been kept in. Again, you could probably only do this once and there may have been a possibility of injury, so they didn't take the risk. But it says, Stan seizes her, they roll about in an embrace. The sofa tips over backwards. They roll about the floor, still embracing. Suddenly, a pair of car headlamps swing round and illuminate the room. We hear the sound of a car engine being revved and then turned off. So it is, of course, Mr. and Mrs. Coombs coming back. She has her headache. Stan says, quick, I must get out or I'll get the sack. The doorbell rings. Maria says, they must not see you. Go that way, to the kitchen. Stan rushes into the kitchen, tries the back door. Maria follows him a little way. Stan says, it's locked, there's no key. Maria says, get in the larder, I will think of something. Stan says, no, I'll be trapped. The bell is heard ringing again. Maria rushes out. Stan gets into the small larder-type cupboard and closes the door. Maria unbolts the door and then opens it. Mr. and Mrs. Coombs come in and Mr. Coombs says, thank you, Maria, my wife is starting one of her headaches. Mrs. Coombs says, I must get a glass of water, making towards the kitchen. Maria, panicking, stops her and says, no, madam, I will get it. Mr. Coombs says, thank you, dear, then you better go. We shall have an early night. Maria rushes into the kitchen. She opens the door of the larder a little and whispers, get out through the milk hatch. She gets a glass of water and rushes out again. Stan comes to just a brick wall in which there is a milk hatch. This is an opening approximately 15 by 10, covered by a small externally opening door. Door is pushed open and there are 2 milk bottles in the hatch. Stan's hand comes in view from inside and takes in the milk bottles. Then he starts to wriggle through the hatch. When he has pushed his head and shoulders through, he struggles and gasps. Oh, blimey, I'm stuck. Suddenly, his eyes fix on an object and register horror. From his point of view, a large, fierce-looking dog is staring at Stan, licking his lips. He moves towards Stan. Horrified, Stan says, no, go away, good dog. Stan is trying to shoo the dog away and the dog coming closer and staring at Stan. Finally, the dog comes up to Stan and starts to lick his face all over. Stan shuts his eyes and has to let him finish. Inside, Mr. Coombs is just seeing Maria off. She's trying to protest. Mr. Coombs, in a firm voice, says, "No, Maria, it's nice of you to offer to work on, but I want to lock up and go to bed. You can come tomorrow. Good night." Mr. Coombs shuts the front door. Maria shrugs her shoulders and walks off. Meanwhile, outside the back again, the dog is still licking Stan. Maria comes round the corner and reacts as she sees Stan and rushes to him, shooing the dog away. Maria says, "Go away, dog, go away," and the dog goes off. Stan says, "Oh, thanks. God knows what he would have done next." Maria says, "Quick, you must get out." He says, "I'm stuck." She tries to pull him, and he says, No, push me back in." Then comes the conversation where she says, "You'll need a key," and Stan says, "Well, I'll wait until they've gone to bed and then get out through the front door." She says, "No." Mr. Coombs locks it and takes the key. Back in the bar, Arthur and Olive are at their table. Both are now pretty sloshed on Mum's vodkas. Olive says to Arthur, "Come on, let's go to bed." And Arthur, slurred, says, "All right, sunshine." They stagger off. As they do, they bump into people as they go. Bert comes back with another drink for Mum. Watching Arthur and Olive as he arrives, Mum has at least 24 glasses in front of her. He has several beer glasses. Bert says, "Here's another, love. You know, these youngsters can't hold their drink. They've hardly had any. And look at them." Arthur and Olive are staggering about, watched by amused other dancers as they go. Bert continues, "And you've had all those vodkas. And look at you. I like a woman who can hold her liquor." Mum says, "You'd be surprised what I can hold." Now, I'm actually not surprised that this was taken out, because as funny as it is, it's very carry-on style and a bit OTT for what I think Mum would normally come out with. It's she's very ladylike and she's good with her humour, but I don't think she would have resorted to something so risque. Bert carries on, "Here, Mabel, is your son babysitting at the chalet tonight?" And Mum says, "No, poor Stan, he had to work. Still, keeps him out of trouble." We then come back to the manager's house, where there was an extended scene in the bedroom which was really quite funny. I'd like to have seen this. So it's described as Stan looks around in panic and dives under one of the beds just before Mrs. Coombs comes in. Mrs. Coombs says, "I can't find my shoes. I suppose you've kicked them under the bed again." Mr. Coombs replies, "Oh, I must have done. I'll fish them out." Mr. Coombs turns to go to the foot of the bed. As he does so, Stan's hand, holding the shoes, comes out from under the end of the bed and puts the shoes down. Coombs arrives just as Stan withdraws his hand. Mr. Coombs says, "You can't have looked very far. They're right here." He takes the shoes and puts them in the corner of the room. There is an old golf bag with some clubs in it, and by its side a brand new putter. His eyes gleam as he takes the putter and practices a few swings. Mrs. Coombs has taken off her gown and climbed into bed. She says, "George, do you have to practice your golf in the bedroom?" She sits up, dabbing dollops of face cream on her face, looking a mess. Mr. Coombs says, "Well, I've got to get some pleasure out of life. I've just got the hang of this new putter. Watch me put the ball in the waste paper basket." The waste paper basket is on its side, past the end of Coombs's bed. Coombs is now standing at the end of his wife's bed. He positions the golf ball, which was by the putter, and aims. He strikes the ball and it goes off at an angle underneath the end of his bed. Mr. Coombs says, "Blast! It's gone under my bed." Mrs. Coombs says, "Then you better get it out, hadn't you?" Mr. Coombs replies, "Oh yes, I suppose so." Just as he starts to bend to get the ball, it comes rolling out of the end of the bed, much to his surprise. Mr. Coombs says, "Look at that, it rolled out by itself. There must be a slope on the floor." He puts the ball on the table, pulls back the bedclothes. Mr. Coombs says, "You may laugh at my golf, but it keeps me fit." Mr. Coombs does a couple of quick arm exercises, then takes a breath and leaps into the bed, landing on his backside. This is the arm exercises we actually see in the film, only they appear here a touch later. Now, if you look closely in the film, when Mr. Coombs comes into the bedroom doing these exercises, if you look to his left-hand side, there is in fact a set of golf clubs. I believe that this would have been filmed. I see no other reason for those golf clubs to be there as a prop. It then continues on, as it does in the film, with Coombs bouncing on the bed, saying it's got no give in it. Mrs. Coombs says, "George, please, I want to get some sleep." She turns her back on him and settles down. Coombs has one final bounce. Stan reacts and can't suppress an involuntary little grunt. "Oh," Stan says, and Mr. Coombs says, "What did you say, dear?" And Mrs. Coombs, mumbling, says, "Nothing." go to sleep. We then come to the next day in the staff canteen where Jack has been questioning Stan and Stan's been bragging, etc. Blakey says, "You do all right, butler?" And Stan, not wishing to admit failure, says, "Oh, of course I did. You know me, very hot-blooded, these Italians." And Blakey says, "Yes, I know. I think I'll have another cuppa." So it's here that he heads over to Luigi to tell him about what went on in the previous evening. So Blakey's telling Luigi, who is looking through the hatch holding a meat cleaver. Luigi is listening with fury. And Blakey says, innocently, "He told me himself. I don't want to cause trouble, but I thought you ought to know. Such a nice girl." Luigi says, "The little swine. I will see he never does it again." It's described as Stan looks in the hatch. Luigi seizes him by the collar and yanks him right through the hatch, out of sight, into the kitchen. Stan says, "No, no, what's up? You're mad. Help, help." Blakey laughs. "That'll teach him." Ha! Described as Stan is being held in a grip of iron by Luigi, who has twisted his tie round and holding him with his left hand. In his right hand he has a meat cleaver, and in front of him on a wooden chopping board there is a long raw oxtail which he is about to cut up. He says furiously, "You dishonour my sister." Stan says, "No." Luigi says, "You little sex mad swine, damn you. I will see you never can do it again, like this." As he speaks, Luigi brings the cleaver down and chops a piece off the oxtail. Stan has a terrified reaction. "No, not that." Blakey is looking through the crack in the hatch. He turns round to the others who are gathering around and saying, "Ha, very good, that'll stop him." So slightly different dialogue there. Maria comes rushing up, grabs Stan and tries to pull him away from Luigi. She says to him, "Let him go, you monster." Luigi replies, "I promised Mama and Papa to protect you, and this I will do. Let me get at him. Let him go." The tug of war starts. Blakey is listening at the crack in the hutch door. The other staff have gathered round. Blakey says, "Ha! He's made me suffer for years. Now he's getting it. He's cutting him short." Maria bites Luigi's arm to make him release Stan. Luigi yells in Italian, "You bitch." He gives Stan a shove as he lets go. Stan goes backwards about 3 paces and sits on a huge cauldron in which the oxtail soup is being prepared. One of the other chefs has been cutting vegetables into it. The cauldron is big enough for Stan's behind to sink right into it. Stan says, "Oh God." So this continues on. Just as he has finally cornered and exhausted the trembling Stan, Mr. Coombs arrives with 2 other chefs who have been to get him. Mr. Coombs says, "What's going on? Leave him alone." Luigi says, "He was with my sister last night. He ruined her reputation," and the conversation continues as it does in the film. Blakey, still listening and looking through a crack, turns to the others all around him and says, "The manager's here now. He'll get the sack." Ha! Serves him right. That's what he did to me. Ha! This has made my day, this says. Now the difference here is when Luigi has told the manager who told him about this so-called get-together between Stan and his sister, Stan says, "Blakey," and Luigi says, "He ruined the honour of my sister." Now Blakey's still actually listening in this, and it says the inspector's face has now dropped a mile. He looks away from the hatch. Blakey says, "Oh my God, I better get back on duty." The door from the kitchen is flung open and Luigi comes bursting in. He says to him, "Come here, you lying swine. I'll kill you. You have dishonoured my sister." Luigi gives the inspector a terrific shove. He goes backwards against the table loaded with plates, crockery, all kinds of remains of food, which collapses as the legs give way. Luigi goes to Blakey and is about to hit him. He says, "You will never again say things like that about my sister. I will kill you first." The inspector scrambles up and dashes away. Coombs and the other chef hang on to Luigi. Stan yells, "He'll get you, Blakey." We then come to the nurse's hut when Jack has paid Joan a visit and she's filled in on the blackboard back in 10 minutes. Jack says, "What, 10 minutes? Cheek, I can do better than that." He rubs out the 10 and makes it 30. Now Joan giggles and says, "Oh, Jack." On a pathway near the first aid building, Blakey is being told off by Coombs. Firmly, he says, "And furthermore, Blake, you still haven't given me a satisfactory explanation of what happened this morning." Blakey says, "Well, it was all a mistake." Blakey has a bruise on his cheek, and he says to Coombs, "If you don't mind, sir, I'd like to go and see the nurse and have this bruise treated where Luigi hit me." Coombs says, All right, but I haven't much sympathy, and in future, just watch your step. There is a photo of Blakey by the examination couch. Scrawled over it is, "To my beloved Joan, ever yours, Cyril." Jack turns the photo towards the wall and says, "Sorry, mate." We then come to the scene where Blakey is fumbling for his key to try and undo the door. He's heard the goings on in the room, and Jack is running for his life. Blakey bursts in, says the normal, "You had a man in here, you trollop." Joan says, "Now, Cyril, don't be silly." Blakey sees Stan's jacket, which is on the chair. He says, "Ah, butler, I should have guessed. I'll fix him. Where is he?" Blakey sees he's a medical type bottle and goes to rush out. Now, Blakey, of course, isn't in a plaster cast here, so he can run pretty fast. He comes outside the building, still waving the medical bottle. He comes out and looks around. Not far away, Stan is walking along in his shirt sleeves. He yells, "Butler." Stan turns round. The inspector rushes up to him. Says, "You little swine, I'm going to kill you, I am." Stan starts backing. He says, "Blakey, what's up? Take it easy." "What's up, you lecherous randy little rat? I'm going to fix you once and for all." Blakey takes a swing at Stan with a bottle. Stan backs away. He says, "You've gone mad." "No, Blakey, no." He then shouts, "Help, he's gone mad, help." Stan turns and runs for it, with the inspector in hot pursuit. Joan has scrambled into her dress and comes out the door. She takes in the scene and starts to run after the inspector. She says, "No, Cyril, don't do it." Stan comes running very fast across the grass towards the boating lake. Blakey has gained on him. As Stan reaches the lake, he has to turn right or left on the path which surrounds it. So here he doesn't go straight into the water as he does in the film. So he makes his decision. The inspector reaches the edge of the pool, decides to take a shortcut, jumps into the pool and splashes across. The kids all start screaming. Olive and little Arthur are in a boat. As Blakey dashes across, they see him and move the boat into his path. Olive says brightly, "Hello, Inspector," and Blakey says, "Get out of my way." He clambers across the boat and swamps it with water. On a pathway near the boating lake, Mr. Coombs comes round the corner of a block of chalets and he reacts, "Good God!" From Coombs's point of view, the inspector is dashing across the lake with all the kids screaming after him. He jumps onto the path, all dripping, looking unkempt and wild. He looks for Stan and dashes off. Blakey comes rushing along, still holding his bottle. Joan appears in front of him from between some chalets. She's taken a shortcut. We then see what occurs in the film. She says, "Please, I can explain." Blakey jumps on her. The dress gets ripped, etc., etc. Coombs comes round the corner and reacts as he sees the inspector rolling about in the grass. "Stop that. Have you gone mad?" And then he carries on, "In the army, we had pills for men like you." So in this version, we don't actually see Coombs sack Blakey. We then come to the main gate of the holiday village. The holiday bus is nearby. Stan and Jack are waiting. Jack says, "Here he comes." From their point of view, Blakey is coming round the corner of the building. He's carrying 2 battered suitcases, his fishing rod, bowl with goldfish and overcoats. So excluding the fishing rod, these are the exact same items that Blakey carries to the depot in the episode Goodbye Stan when he's chucked out his digs. So we can safely assume that this is pretty much all Blakey owns in the world. Blakey comes towards them. "Cheerio, Blakey, no hard feelings," Stan says. Blakey replies, "Yes, there are. Whatever happens, I shall see to it that I get a job where I can never be working with yous two again. You've ruined my life. That's what you've done." The inspector walks through the main gate and trudges off. Stan and Jack together say, "Goodbye, Blakey." Olive comes rushing up, all out of breath and in a panic. Stan, what's up?" "We've just heard the manager's coming round to have a look at our chalet at 5. Stan, aghast, says, "Oh, blimey, what's he found out?" "Now look, don't admit anything. We'll have to talk our way out of it. I'll be back from this trip as soon as I can." It's night time in the butler's chalet. Arthur, Mum and Olive are waiting for Stan to arrive. The door bursts open. Stan comes in, a bit out of breath. "What happened? What did the manager say?" Mum says, "Well, he had a look at the loo." Stan, aghast, says, "What?" Arthur says, "Yes, and he examined the paintwork." And Stan says, "Oh no, what did he do?" Mum says, "He gave me £10. Stan replies, "Eh?" Mum says, "We won the prize for the best kept chalet of the week." "You what?" he says. Olive says, "He said the toilet looked brand new." Arthur says, ha, yes. And he said the paint was so clean it looked as if it could have been done yesterday. Stan, breaking into a laugh, says, you're kidding. What a relief. We've got 10 quid to spend. I think this would have been a fun scene to have in the film. Arthur says, we've got 10 quid. Olive says, and we're going to spend it at the farewell ball. Later on, at the farewell ball, it's in full swing. The ballroom is packed with holidaymakers. We set the scene. Mum and Bert are dancing away madly. Stan and Jack are standing on the edge of the floor, looking at the dancers. Jack says, your mother's having a bit of a go. And Stan says, she's a fool to herself. He'll be worn out before she gets him back to the chalet. On another part of the dance floor, Wally and Lil are dancing away, trying to cope with a modern beat, standing away from one another. Behind them, Arthur and Olive are doing the same. Wally and Olive turn round and are dancing face to face. Wally recognises her. Hello, love. Here, you look better in your nightie. Olive says, oh. Lil turns round, sees Wally and pulls him round. Keep your eyes off her. You saw enough of her the other night. I didn't do nothing, Wally says. Lil replies, who would know that better than me, you great big soft Nelly? They resume dancing. Arthur and Olive are now dancing close together. Olive has her arms around his neck. He's very sloshed and dancing with a stupid grin on his face. Olive says, oh, Arthur. She rubs herself up against him. Arthur says, tell you what, sunshine, I'm in the mood. Olive, terribly eager, says, oh, are you? Come on then. They are near their table. They go back to it. It's covered with empty glasses. Olive takes her bag. Arthur swigs a last drink. Olive starts kissing his neck and can't wait to get him away. She practically drags him off. Jack says, "Cool, blimey, I never thought I'd live to see the day." And Stan says, "She'll kill him." As Arthur and Olive stagger off, the dance continues. There are a few additions back at the chalet as Olive is preparing herself for a night of passion. Olive sexily says, "I'm ready, darling." Arthur, in the bed on his back, is fast asleep. He snores. Olive says, "Arthur." Olive goes to the bed and shakes him to no avail. He is out for the count. Pleading, "Wake up, wake up." Olive lifts up Arthur to the sitting position. He grins faintly. She pushes him down, realising that it is no go. Heartbroken, she says, "Pig." She sits on her bed and starts crying. Following day, Stan and Jack are by the bus at the departures to the railway station sign. Jack says, "Here they come." The motorcycle comes along with Arthur, Olive, Mum, little Arthur. Olive has her goggles off and is dabbing her eyes, kind of how she does in the film. Jack says, "Here, Olive's been crying all morning. What happened to her last night?" Stan says, "Nothing, that's why she's crying, but Mum did all right." As the motorcycle goes by, Bert, who is waiting to get on the bus with his case and holding a walking stick, waves and blows a kiss to Mum. So slightly different here because on the film, he's up the top deck, waving his stick, blowing the kiss and says, "Keep in touch." Stan says, "I don't know what she was up to, but he's cut another notch in his walking stick." Stan and Jack are waving. They say bye, goodbye. Stan says, "Come on, better get them off to the station and pick up the next lot." Stan gets on the bus and drives off. On its return, the bus draws up and a new load of holidaymakers are arriving. Jack is helping them off the bus. Stan comes from the front. Jack says, "Here, there's a couple of smashers arrived." Stan, very eager, says, "Go on." And Jack says, "I've been chatting them up on the way. Here they come." And a funny description here, Doreen and Betty, two very sexy but not too young and not too smart girls, get off the bus. Jack says, "This is my mate Stan." They both giggle. Stan says, "Hello, loves." Jack says, "I was just telling the girls you'll take them on one of your mystery tours tonight." And the conversation continues as it does in the film. So it's the same scenario in the script with the bus becoming stuck on the beach and the girls decide to walk it. In the movie, Stan and Jack come back twice to see the bus. The first time it's got some water around the wheels, and then the second time it's almost fully submerged. Here they have the conversation when they've just left the girls. They say, "We'll have to leave it here till morning." Stan says, "What? You potty? I've got to take a tour out." Jack says, "We'll come back early, then the tide will be right out, miles away." Stan, a bit relieved, says, "Oh, yeah, but we'll have to come back at dawn." And Jack says, "Of course." Described as Stan and Jack come along a deserted stretch of road behind a sand dune. Stan says, "Cool, I hope it's all right." Jack says, "Course it is. I studied the tides when I did my national service." This way. They climb up the dune. As they get to the top, they look over. Their unbelieving reaction. Stan says, "Oh no." From their point of view, the sea is very close and quite a way out. The unmistakable top deck of the bus is sticking out of the sea, awash with the waves. Stan, panic-stricken, says, "This is it. We've had it. What should we tell the manager?" Jack, a little too confident, says, "Don't worry, I'll think of something." Which of course he doesn't. The next scene is Stan and Jack are outside the labour exchange waiting to go in. Jack says, "Well, at least I've got the manager to give us 2 weeks' money." Stan says, as he does in the film, "Yeah, that's gone now and I need a job quick." They move through the door. There is a window at which to apply for the clerk. Stan and Jack come up to it. There is no clerk in view. Stan, tapping on the counter, says, "Anybody there?" A man comes up and looks at them through the opening, reacting violently. It is the inspector in civvies. We do get an almost similar conversation here, but there's some little tweaks. Stan says, "Blakey." He turns to Jack and says, "Now we've had it." And Blakey says, "You're not out of work?" And Stan says, "Yes." In the movie, Blakey says, "Good, because I've got nothing for you." But here, he just does his trademark laugh. And Stan says, "Turn it up, Blakey. You must have a job for a driver. Come on." And it's here Blakey is looking through a card index. He says, "I'll fix you a job, all right. I've got just the thing for a driver like you." We come to a road under repair. Jack, in workman's clothes, with maybe an old busman's cap on, is spreading tar macadam on a hole in the road. Jack says, "OK, come on." Stan is sitting in the driving seat of a steamroller. He is wearing old clothes, including a very old busman's jacket and cap. He drives the steamroller forward over the tar. And that is the end of the film. So a very interesting original ending compared to the ending we get in the film. I'm glad they changed it to the wrecking ball because it kind of sums up Stan Butler really. He wrecks everything he touches, which is quite clear throughout the series and all the films. So that was a good decision. I would love to know whether this was ever filmed. Wouldn't it be lovely if there was some footage out there of anything from this film that was removed, possibly at Studio Canal, but, you know, don't hold your breath. It's been 50 years and something would have been unearthed by now. There is a fantastic silent footage video on YouTube of somebody recording during a break of filming in Prestatyn on the holiday camp, so check that out. So I hope this has enlightened you as to what might have been in regards to the film, and it'll probably make a bit of difference the next time you watch the movie, and you know, you'll start to notice where certain things were placed and then removed. It's like when you see these deleted scenes on Blu-rays and DVDs that you know, when you then go back and watch the original cut, you can then kind of incorporate them yourself. So thanks for joining me. If you've listened to all this, you really are a die-hard fan, and I'll see you again. Thanks a lot.